everybody, and welcome back to the T.H.O. Movie Reviews podcast, the show where we bring you passionate, honest, and insightful film criticism. I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson, and I am joined today by Jim Newman. Jim, I don't know, I had something I wanted to ask you about.
All right.
Before we get started,
I'm open to your question.
Because this is a topic I'm interested in. Unfortunately, we don't have time to get to it in this particular podcast. But do you hear about this Richard Linklater movie, this Stephen Sondheim adaptation? He's going to shoot for 20 years.
No.
He's gonna. So it's based on Sondheim's Merrily We Roll Along. And it was funny, like, I heard that news, and, for a second I was excited, and then I was like, wait a second, is this, I did a 12-year shoot, now I have to do a 20-year shoot to prove I'm, bigger than I was?
Well, in other words, he wants the characters to age? Is that...
Yeah, he's going to shout for 20 years with the same actor.
My God, I hope he has a great insurance policy.
I know, yeah.
How big a cast is this?
I know he's got Blake Jenner and Beanie Feldstein and Ben Platt, so it's a promising cast, but it's just...
Well,
I thought it was funny when I saw it.
I hope they're healthy people, because it would be a shame, as has happened, I guess, a few times in the production of a TV show or a film, where they have to sneak in another human at a certain point because, oh my God, the person died.
Yeah.
Otherwise was unable to complete the performance, and it's awkward.
So imagine if they tried this with James Dean.
Oh, yeah.
They would have been screwed.
You would have thought actuarially a healthy young guy like that, at the top of his game, was going to last forever.
Although you don't like James Dean, right?
I don't like him. I think he overacted like crazy all the time. All the time. I mean, any movie that you pick that he's in, when it gets to him, I think he's kind of embarrassing. The way he emotes.
I'm a fan of him, but I totally get where you're coming from. Because you look at these kind of old, method actors, like even Brando back in the day, it's like, well, by today's standards of naturalism, they're pretty over the top.
Well, okay, then that brings up a very interesting point. That on the waterfront, when Brando's in the back of the car, and he's telling his brother,
Charlie,
I could have been somebody. I could have been somebody.
I could have been a contender.
Yeah, now...
For the Venetian Blinds, right?
Would you say that he's overacting there? Because I don't think he is. I think it's like one of the most brilliant things. The sorrow, just the regret, and the knowledge that it's over for him.
Yeah.
It's so sad. It's brilliant. And... I would not compare him to James Dean at all.
No, that's a great performance.
Yes.
Sure. I mean, and that's a great movie. I mean, talk about movies that have aged well. I mean,
right, where something works. But, I've never seen I could have been contender scene from James Dean. I've never seen anything of that quality where I believed that he was doing anything other than earning his salary by going over the top. If you would love me. That kind of thing.
Jim, you're tearing me apart.
Well,
not really. But.
No, but since I've trashed him there, I mean, just for fairness sake, could you summarize why you like him so much? James Dean.
I don't. I'm not like a card-carrying like James Dean.
Don't distance yourself. You be supportive.
I just don't.
You buy him somehow.
I do buy him. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But I don't like have an altar or anything where I pray to his ghost or anything. But I don't have quite the same reaction, because I feel he's playing rebel without a cause. He's a melodramatic teenager. It's
Well, maybe
we have those love me moments.
I guess that's it's. I would say that your position is certainly arguable. I mean, because I haven't seen
and yours is too.
every
Absolutely,
teenager.
yeah.
I mean, sure. I just think it's disappointing that he is lionized so considerably by people as a fine actor when, well, I mean, he certainly had the skill to turn on his emotion when he wanted to and raise his voice and get very sad. I think the man was probably really unstable as a person. It seems that way. I mean, letters that he wrote describing his absolute abject unhappiness in Hollywood, even though he was a star.
Sure.
So
yeah. Life in the fishbowl, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the main event of today. This is our annual podcast where we answer movie questions. In the past, this will take y'all a little bit behind the scenes here. We've taken questions from listeners. I did a little different this year. I actually just sort of looked at some of the issues of movies right now that I think are pertinent and need to be talked about. And so I came up with questions around those. So,
okay. So we're not going to just rely on over the transom kinds of.
We did. We're not relying on the people this time. These are home. This is a homegrown Q&A session.
I have to say that before you turned the mic on, we were having a great discussion actually about the same stuff. And I wish that the mic had been on because you were making some good points.
Well, maybe from now on we'll just turn it on
right.
the minute you come through the door.
Yeah, it could be. I know you have. It just makes editing harder though.
Well, so the first question is, we love movies. We love to talk about movies we love. But one thing we don't always get to talk about is the movies we hate, and which is, oftentimes a subject that can be not necessarily as fun, but close to it in its own way, So
yeah,
I wanted to hear from you. What do you think is the worst film of 2019 so far?
Well, I mean, I know when I say this, I'm going to be perceived as an outlier, and I probably am.
Bring it on.
Because, well, most people loved Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and when my friend and I left the theater, we came back to my condo and sat down, and for an hour and a half or so, we discussed all of the flaws that we thought we saw. And it made for an entertaining evening to do that. And for that reason, I would say that the movie's worth seeing.
Sure.
Because it just really ticked me off. And how
well said.
really bad it was. So unfortunately, and it's almost like you're going for the headlines by taking a popular movie by a star director and saying, hated it. But I did hate it. So there you go.
Before I reveal my pick, I do have to say, I mean, that's, I have had, kind of a complicated reaction to that movie.
Oh, yes?
Where I enjoyed it, but, and I talked about this in the review I did with our colleague Hannah Dawson. I said, this is a entertaining movie that's completely full of shit.
It is full of shit.
Yeah, it's everything the movie is saying about, about Hollywood, about art and life and masculinity is just total irksome hogwash. And the funny thing is, and I know a lot of people who like the movie are ready to say, it's Tarantino, so the point is that it rewrites history. I'm not talking about that at all.
Yeah.
He can rewrite history all he wants. I'm talking about, and we'll get into this later because we actually have a question coming up about the movie, but the just the total disingenuousness of his vision of what it is that makes Hollywood so great. And I'll leave it at that. We'll get to it, but it's a straight up irritating movie despite its its charms, of which I think it has some, certainly.
Well, it just seems the exploration of Hollywood in that movie is veneer thin.
Yes,
it has zero depth, in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
And speaking of problems with Hollywood, I actually had a hard time with this question, even though I came up with it, because I was trying to think of a movie like Colin Trevorrow's The Book of Henry, where I just hated it on every level. Mm-hmm. Where I, not only, with the questions like these, I always like to think not just a movie I thought was bad, but a movie that, was bad and, offended me as a human being.
Well, on what level? I mean, morally, or was there something about the way the camera was placed and the scenes were staged? What turned you off?
Of The Book of Henry?
Yeah.
Well, and this is...
Because that's a real powerful reaction.
Yeah. I mean, this is, rehashing a 2-year-old argument because but I'm happy to do it because it's a fun movie to make fun of. I mean, I can't get behind a movie that sort of utilizes this toxic mixture of dying child tear jerker tropes, along with an assassination plot that's played as something quirky out of a Wes Anderson movie that is actually really twisted. I mean, this is a movie about a child who dies and leaves his mother instructions on how to assassinate their next door neighbor, and the movie doesn't even seem to know what it's doing. It's a very cheery, almost kind of it feels like an old Spielberg movie. It has the kind of wide-eyed wonderment of E.T. or Close Encounters,
right?
But it's about this really, really twisted scenario, and it kind of understands that. But I think Trevorrow, had no idea what he was dealing with, and it's, but the movie that I want to talk about for this year is, I feel like this is sort of an odd one to bring up because it's not a truly awful movie. It's just an aggressively mediocre movie, but it symbolizes something I think is really wrong with Hollywood, and that movie is Dark Phoenix. Which, for those who haven't heard about it, it's the final installment in the X-Men franchise, or at least the X-Men franchise under Fox, which, the series now gets, get a makeover now that it's at Disney, and it's, I said from the beginning when this movie was announced, it's directed by Simon Kinberg. It's his directorial debut. He's a screenwriter and producer. I said, you can't, start out with your directorial career with a movie like this. Doesn't, people were saying things like, well, he produced The Martian, he's worked with Ridley Scott, he's seen Ridley work, so, he'll know how to be a good director.
Yeah.
It doesn't work that way.
No.
It doesn't work that way. Adam Sandler could watch, could go back in time and watch Stanley Kubrick work. I wouldn't make him Stanley Kubrick, And, I just really... The movie bugged me because, growing up, I was a big fan of the early X-Men films. To see it come to such an ignoble end, and under the guidance of a director who really had no idea what he was doing, clearly had no idea how to tell a story in visual terms, because he made what feels like, a big budget episode of a superhero TV show on the CW. It's just the kind of the epitome of industry privilege gone awry. And I really think that, you look at most of the great directors, they cut their teeth on really little films to kind of find their voice, find their style. I've become really obsessed with El Mariachi lately, and that's, with that movie, you get real, stripped down ingenuity. Robert Rodriguez, he had to figure out who he was with very minimal resources, because he didn't have stars, he didn't have a big budget. He had to, go out there on the set, do creative things like, didn't want to pay for 2 guitar cases, so he used, one guitar case, shot it creatively to make it look like there was 2. I think, to be a great filmmaker, you got to learn lessons like that. So I don't know. That's why I picked Dark Phoenix, because I feel like it sums up, a trend of these first timers, being given films that they really, really aren't ready for, and shouldn't have. I mean, that's...
and I really do have a confession to make, which is, as I look at the list of movies I've seen in 2019, 3 of them are documentaries. And I'm afraid that suggests that I'm pulling away from the market in some way, because I'm not drawn myself to the superhero movies. I do watch them on HBO and things like that, but I could say that the movies that I liked the most were the 3 documentaries that I've seen. And then Free Solo is a knockout. Have you seen that?
No.
Free Solo is about the guy without any kind of safety harnesses at all, climbing El Capitan in Yosemite, going up 3,000 feet or more?
Oh, something like, yeah. And
it's brutal and powerful.
And it's funny, I wanted to see that, but, it was at Cinema 21 where I work for months.
Right.
And it was just pandemonium. And so, I associate that movie with just, being exhausted and, popping. But I'll see it someday, because, I gotta say, it sounds like quite a sight to see. I mean, certainly from what you're saying.
Jimmy Chin, who did... another movie, I think I'm going to get the name wrong. It's called Maruto or something.
I think it was Maru, right?
Thank you, Maru. Yes, I don't want to do him a disservice.
It's a husband and wife.
His wife is a very good director. I think she's credited with directing Free Solo. Jimmy Chin is mainly a climber and a photographer. I associate these movies with him because he's the on-camera representative much of the time. He appears in the films commenting admiringly, usually, about these other intrepid climbers. Mm-hmm. And he just seems like a very likable personality. But you're right, he and his wife have made at least 2 great movies, Maru and Free Solo. Both of them have an emotional underpinning that is more than just the awe-inspiring nature of the danger that the climbers face. There's the humanity of the people, and the guy that climbs in Free Solo could be said to have a death wish. And what did his mother have to do with that? It's like they bring up stuff like that, sort of obliquely, but it's there. And it's great. And the other one I really liked of the 3 was Echo in the Canyon, which is about... I think we've had that at Cinema 21
as well.
Oh, and did you see it? No.
No, I didn't.
It's a wonderful film, man.
9.
God, it's great. It's about the music industry, the Mamas and Papas and Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, that kind of group from the 60s, and their music then, an examination of their music then and where they are now. And it's just a great mix by Jakob Dylan, one of Bob Dylan's sons. Mm-hmm. And he's royalty to these people just because he's family to Bob Dylan, but he doesn't overplay that. He's a very low-key person.
That's awesome.
And he fits in, and so when he asks a question, they take it seriously and they answer him seriously.
Nice.
It's just perfect. And they have rights to all the music. It's just an elegant film and really worth seeing. So those are my favorites. Dumbo,
you saw Dumbo? I saw Dumbo too.
Dumbo.
I reviewed it for the paper actually. For one, that's the only reason I saw it. Because I literally got paid to see it. But
okay, well, what did you think ultimately? I thought it was a commercial.
Yeah, it was. I gave it 3 stars, and that was being very generous.
Yes,
to be honest,
But you're a nice man. That's all I gotta say.
The reason I went 3 and not 2, we can't do half stars.
Oh, you can't.
Unfortunately,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
If we could, my ratings would be a lot different in a lot of cases. But but the reason I went to 3 was because I thought it was fairly mediocre movie, but I thought at least this one had Ava Green vamping it up, and Michael Keaton is this very just deliciously demented villain, and it had some with the whole crazy fiery destruction at the end. It had some nice sadistic Tim Burton touches, But I mean, look, I'm under no illusions. I mean, that movie's Exhibit A for what's wrong with mainstream Hollywood.
Kind of
too much
that way.
regurgitation. Not enough invention. And to your point about you describe yourself as pulling away from the market.
Yes,
I look at my favorite movies of the year. The only mainstream one that I really liked was Toy Story 4, and I see that as an outlier because that's Pixar. They have their own way of doing things that's very different from the rest of the industry. They're really committed to the art of storytelling.
Right.
Aside from that, movies that really stayed with me were Long Day's Journey into Night, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Midsummer. All movies that they're Long Day's Journey is Chinese film that's has an hour-long tracking shot, so it's pretty far outside the mainstream. And Midsummer is from A24. Last Black Man in San Francisco is as well, and was actually a movie that was crowdfunded to get made. So
really, and it succeeded, and you liked it.
Yeah, I did.
Wow.
Yeah, it's funny. I can't remember if I was talking with you about this. At some point in this podcast, we were talking about crowdfunding and kind of, how sometimes it's, it's like raising money for movies that the studios were right not to make it, like Zach Braff's film Wish I Was Here, which was just cringe-inducing in my opinion. But this was a case where The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Well, that's a very unique story. No studio, even I would argue Fox Searchlight would say oh yes, let's make this low-budget film about this guy from Oakland who secretly moves into his childhood home when it's abandoned, and it's kind of magical realism, and it's about a love story between a man and a house. No, that wouldn't get made if it wasn't crowdfunded. So
okay,
it was worth raising that money in that case, because it's a very beautiful and entertaining movie.
Where is that movie now? Because I think I've heard the name, but I have no idea how to access it. Did you see it in the theater?
I did. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. I saw it. I saw it a couple times actually. But
is it on Hulu or
is it Cinema 21? I don't know if it's if it's
on
streaming yet. But
service.
Yeah, if anyone's listening, if you know where The Last Black Man in San Francisco is playing, drop that in the comments section.
Oh yeah, and let me know.
Yeah. I think you'd like it. Yeah, it's really good.
I think I would.
We got to move on.
Sure.
Speaking of streaming services, so we got an interesting little duel going on in the industry. Netflix is increasingly scooping up more and more talented filmmakers. They want, the major chains like Cinemark, Regal, AMC to play these films, but those chains demand a 3-month theaters only window.
Yeah, they want them embargoed for good reason.
Yes, yeah, and I understand that, but I do want to get into the question of, they tried to negotiate. Negotiations failed. So, now, for instance, a movie like Martin Scorsese's The Irishman, where, for all we know, it may be terrible. I thought his last film, Silence, was awful, frankly. Although I loved The Wolf of Wall Street before that. The Irishman Could be good, could be terrible. Either way, it's going to be essential viewing for anyone who cares about movies because it's Scorsese. But because of this failure to reach an agreement, a lot of people simply will not have the option of seeing it on the big screen. And I know first world problems and all that, but
Well,
I think these things are interesting because they say a lot about where the industry's been, where it's going. So I put the question to you: do the theaters need to make more concessions because Netflix is agreeing to a window that will be about a month where it's theaters only? I mean, do the theaters in return need to give up something to meet the streaming services?
I think it's a complicated question, and it has to do with the market at the refreshment stand. I think as much as anything for the
Sure.
venues. I mean, those theater companies need bodies in the door, and are the people. The 3 months sounds. That is, that they're asking for that 3-month embargo where no one can see the movie unless they go to the theater.
Yeah.
Sounds like a fairly long time because that's a hit movie that would last in a theater for 3 months. On the other hand, if they gave that up, then there would never be the possibility of a hit movie really paying off for the theater chain.
Yes.
And I think they're afraid of stuff like that because they see the rug being pulled out from under them and their business potentially withering because, I mean, sure, the big screen can mean something to someone, but I think for the layman, I don't think they can actually point to the increase in pleasure they feel because they're seeing it on this huge wall as opposed to in surround sound in their own home, especially with the technology improving all the time for televisions.
Sure, yeah.
So I understand their position. I don't know their business, but I understand that they're afraid, and I know enough to understand that the economics is complicated and that only a 1 month window doesn't seem that great because that's only 4 weeks maybe. The weekends are the big part of their business, and so there's a little bit of word of mouth. Maybe a movie takes a while to build, or maybe it's a huge hit already from the get-go from the first weekend, and it just doesn't slide down to 20% the next weekend. It's still holding, it's got legs. A movie like that is essential to them, I would think.
Right. Well, yeah, and we should point out that a lot of these movies are the kind of movies that might need some time to find their audience. Like,
True.
Netflix has Noah Baumbach's Marriage Story, which looks like it will be certainly one of the most talked about movies of the fall. I don't think, there's going to be a big opening weekend gross like, let's all go see that, movie where Adam Driver and Scarlett Johansson get divorced.
Oh my God!
But, if people are hearing over, a period of weeks, oh, there's this movie, you got to check it out. The performances are great,
Really stuck with me.
Yeah, so the 1 month window is not, is not really much for a movie like that. I think you make a good point.
Well, and the other part of it is the talent pool. And we were talking before we started the podcast about how there does seem to be a pretty solid element of mediocrity in the business among the people who produce or direct films.
Yeah, and I think we should make the distinction of that. We're talking about mainstream Hollywood.
Yes, we are.
Exciting stuff is happening, kind of outside the halls of
Always
Universal and Paramount, and Disney. But I mean, it's the difference, between back in the day when it's like, MGM, is coming out with When Harry Met Sally. Well, good luck finding something that sophisticated and edgy and entertaining from, a major studio today. I mean, A24 or, Focus might release a movie like that, but you're not gonna see that from MGM now, and not just because they're in total shambles.
So you could say that a streaming service and wanting to stream the movies after just 1 month is cutting into income for the theater companies on the front end. Money they would get from the ticket booths. But not only that, the pool of talent seems to be dwindling. That is, the people that can actually make an edgy Harry Met Sally kind of movie that would bring people to the theater. Maybe those people are already doing series for HBO or Netflix or Hulu or whoever. And so the people that do put the movies in the theaters for that 3-month window, those individuals aren't as good as they might be, because those people are working somewhere else for a big salary for Netflix or whoever.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I have some hope because every now and then there's something like I know you and I are both fans of The Big Sick. Every now and then there's something like that kind of restores.
Yeah,
but even that's that's a little movie that Amazon acquired at Sundance. That comes from outside the system.
And I forget the name of the star of that, but that man's next movie was...
Camille Nanjiani,
that next film might have or might not have been good. The reviews were pretty terrible. I didn't see it, and
is that the one? Was that Stuber?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that looks terrible.
It's about an Uber driver, and so he might have been a one-hit wonder. I mean, really, it isn't necessarily the case that man has a big career in creating humorous.
I think it's all about how he chooses his projects. I mean,
true. But
Stuber like that looks like something you should have seen on paper. That was.
Well, it's a buddy film, I guess. With lots of chasing and cars.
Sure. So I mean, in terms of like this battle between theaters chains, between streaming services, specifically Netflix, I actually have an answer to this that I think might surprise anyone who's kind of followed what I've said in the past about the issue. I am someone who thinks that the big screen will always be the best way to see a movie, and not just because of the size of the screen, because that's part of it, but simply because of the experience of just little things, walking into a movie theater, seeing a movie at a specific time, even just walking by the posters in the hallway and the taste of what's to come. Like, to me, all of that it's kind of magical and mythical, frankly.
It's a sensory pleasure on even the smell of the popcorn.
I can't create that in my own home.
No, you cannot.
No matter how big my TV is.
Yeah.
But I have to say, I do think the theaters should give some ground. And the reason I think that is because there was kind of a little debate going on within the Academy during the Oscars last year where, Roma, frankly, I don't even think this is arguable, but, I know there are some people who would argue with it, and, that's totally their right. I don't think it's even arguable that Roma was the best film of the Best Picture nominees.
It was great.
It was.
I love that movie.
But, there were some people who thought that, because it was a Netflix film, it wasn't true cinema. And Spielberg felt that way, and he was one of the people who was pushing for Green Book. And I think anyone who's seen those two films knows that, Roma may have been on Netflix, but that movie is cinema in a way Green Book never even dreamt of being,
Okay,
And yet, because, a deal couldn't be reached, the only place, you could see Roma for miles around in Oregon was the Hollywood Theater if you wanted to see it on the big screen. And I think that, there's got to be some kind of compromise that can, bring these, really worthwhile, important movies that Netflix is scooping up to a wider audience. Like, honestly, I think, the 3-month window that we talked about, I think that's pretty short because, it used to be a lot longer when I was growing up. I think it was probably an even bigger window, when you were growing up.
Probably.
And I hate to see that threatened because I believe in preserving the sanctity of the big screen experience, but at the same time, for our listeners, if you're not where we are, we live in Portland, Oregon. The big Regal independent theater is the Fox Tower. I mean, I really think a movie like Roma or The Irishman should be able to play at a Regal theater like Fox Tower, so people or even a theater like out in the suburbs like Bridgeport that shows some independent films. Like, they should be able to show it so people who are like outside the Portland area, like, they don't have to like drive deep into Portland to the Hollywood, although they should, because the Hollywood's great. But
those are wonderful theaters out in the suburbs. I mean, Regal invested a lot of money.
They did, really. And I just really think that Roma is a film that I think was not only one of the best films of last year. I think it's an important film in the history of cinema, given what Cuarón achieved. Yeah. And I just think that like, there has to be some compromise to make sure that films like that, and I presume there will be films like it, of, if not that caliber, in that vein that Netflix makes in the future. I think there's got to be a way to work out a deal, and I don't think there could ever be a deal that made either side completely happy. But I worry that by sticking to their guns so strongly, the theaters are going to be left out of the game entirely. And I think they want to stay in the game. It might be worth it to give some ground,
because you're saying they have such a weak negotiating position that they should give. Well, then what would an ideal agreement look like in your view?
That's a really good question. And you were saying you don't know the business. I don't really know the business either, even though I work in it. I know how to make change and make popcorn, and that's I don't the other stuff is beyond me. But I think that perhaps there needs to be a deal like a 1.5 month window. Theaters only for a
6
month
weeks?
and 15 days.
Okay.
Yeah, six weeks, if you will. Yeah, it's I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. That's a way that springs to mind. I think they should consider it.
I'll bet you that the owners, stockholders at Regal would say that's cutting our income so severely that we should probably sell the stock and move on. Don't you think that's possible?
I hear that, but at the same time, like, the window will be preserved for films like the Avengers movies and stuff. Whereas I feel
in other words, a multi-tiered agreement where
exactly. Yeah, thank you for making the
for longer. Yeah.
For
longer
instance,
periods and shorter periods, depending.
Yeah, like say for instance, like we got Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker coming out in December.
Yeah.
That movie and other mainstream films like it keep a 3-month window where it's theaters only, or frankly even a longer window.
Yes.
But like for The Irishman, that's kind of a specialty movie anyway. Why not say like, okay, 6 weeks theaters only, and then we can have it on Netflix, have it in theaters as well, or even exclusive 6-week run, however they want to do it, and anything to make it so, and that you can get these movies on the big screen. And also, like, I like the way you described it as a multi-tiered system. I think that's really good because, you know, like these movies play differently anyway. You know, it's different audiences seeking them out. There's some overlap, but I think that, you know, if you have a multi-tiered system, it's not like, you know, they're giving up everything.
No,
you know, they're making, you know, an important exception to like stay a part of the industry, stay a part of the business of making quality films that push the envelope. I mean, look, people who know the business, I'm sure, can figure out a better way to do it than, you know, what we're talking about.
I don't know,
but
man.
I think that is
I hope they were listening.
You know?
I hope they were listening to us because, I mean, I think we sound like consultants here. I mean, we're giving them good information.
I think we do. You know?
Yeah, we're available.
Ferguson and Newman, you know. Look us up. Well, let's move on to another question. You know, I figured, you know, we had to have at least one kind of nerdy question in here. So I decided not to do a question about this deal between Disney and Sony that fell apart about the Spider-Man movies, because I frankly don't care at this point. So I settled on a nerdy question that I feel like is a little bit meatier. Recently announced that Lana Wachowski is going to direct a fourth Matrix film with Keanu Reeves returning.
Yes.
I don't know if we've ever discussed the Matrix together.
I have not discussed it with you. I think I've seen 2 of them.
Okay. Well, I want to hear your thoughts. Like, is this, you know, and I think this is a question that's been debated a bit already. So I think, you know, it's time we weighed in on it. Do you think this is, as some people are saying, like kind of what the industry needs? You know, a big budget movie that presumably is going to deal with some, you know, complex philosophical ideas, or is this, you know, a typical example, the industry going back to the well, kind of desperate for intellectual property, and it's not, you know, something to get one's hopes up?
Yeah, but I think the answer to that is proof in the pudding kind of situation where it really depends on what's on the screen.
Sure.
I don't think we can say right now, because if the previous premise, which is that the world is in fact software and we are all elements in the system, in some computational system, then that gets pretty tired to me.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it sure got tired in the sequels. I mean,
yeah.
You know?
And so if it's that alone, then thumbs down, in my opinion.
Sure.
But the other possibility is that someone has some magnificent new insight, maybe based on the quantum world.
Sure.
About is a particle a wave, or is a wave a particle, and is in fact the whole universe essentially a particle, and that there literally is nothing without radiation, nothing at all. I mean, and so that's a complicated thought, and I don't know if you could even touch it on screen, but maybe you could.
Sure. I mean, that's funny when you're talking. You know? That actually sounds like what you're saying. It sounds like Matrix dialogue. You know, yeah. I mean, it sounds like something the Wachowskis would write. You know,
if they go there and somehow popularize some of the implications of quantum physics, which says that there's no such thing as space without radiation, that space is a radiation. Mm-hmm. It's a field.
Sure.
So if you take it away, infinity doesn't mean anything. We don't know. We have never experienced nothing because we're in this radiation field. So it's set. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm gonna go back and get another degree so I can unpack all my.
Oh, I know. It almost makes no sense.
No. It's interesting. You know? It's interesting though. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, so if these guys are sufficiently brilliant to not only hold that very obscure concept in mind, but they can go even further than that and make it into an intelligible narrative. Can you imagine what that must be like?
Yeah,
If the Matrix did that, then I'm all for it, man.
I agree. Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
And one thing that excites me is you've got the Wachowskis also with Tom Tykwer adapted David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas, and that was a movie that I think
it worked.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's a movie, by the way, that I think gets better with each viewing.
That's the nice thing.
Yeah, and David Mitchell, wrote the novel. Well, he's one of the writers on this new Matrix film, and it's like, wow, how many big budget Hollywood sequels are co-written by David Mitchell? I mean, that's like, if nothing else, like, that gets your interest. I mean, I love taking a deep dive into a director's career. I did that with a couple months ago with Lily and Lana Wachowski, and I had a really great time. I came out of that, certainly seeing that they've had their missteps, namely the Matrix sequels and Jupiter Ascending, but I came out of it all a big fan of what they're capable of. I think we both really like Christopher Nolan. I think Christopher Nolan's a better filmmaker than the Wachowskis, but I think one area in which they outshine him just a little bit is, I think he's very crafty about kind of knowing what audiences want. And I think he's very skillful about, kind of like, to a certain degree, pushing expectations, but also working within, what people are expecting just a little bit. And I think one of the reasons why the Wachowskis have so many flops is, like, they don't do that at all. And with Speed Racer, they made, like, the abstract, candy-colored, experimental, fusion epic that the world still isn't ready for. I mean,
it may never be.
Yeah, that may never be. So I admire the guts, and also, I mean, like, there's the fact that this is the first feature film that Lana Wachowski has done alone. So that's kind of interesting. Lily Wachowski's off doing a TV series. So, just one Wachowski, how does that change things?
Yes.
That'll be interesting to see. And also, and anyone out there can correct me if I'm wrong, I think this will be probably the biggest film yet in film history to be directed by a trans filmmaker. So, I mean, I think, obviously, that's a perspective, that that we haven't had, and I say the biggest film yet because, I mean, I assume this is going to be a bigger budget than any of the other Matrix films because, it's the actors are going to be more expensive, because they've been around a while longer.
Yeah.
Lana Wachowski is going to be more expensive to hire because, she's had, a long career over 7 films now. So, I mean, I assume it's going to be at minimum a $200 million movie.
Damn.
I would not be surprised if it were more, but who knows? Maybe they're going to be very fiscally conservative.
Well, they must be banking on a huge audience that's in there.
Yeah.
So,
well, and this is Warner Brothers, and they had a terrible summer. So they I can see why they would want to go back to comfortable territory.
Well, I read somewhere recently that Keanu Reeves is enjoying a great resurgence, that he has had a year where he's appeared in more films than any other actor, and that his popularity has risen tremendously. I don't know how much was simply the opinion of the people who wrote or edited that article.
No, I think that's generally
people are praising
true.
him to the skies.
Yeah.
And there was a particularly poignant moment on the CBS night show. I forget the name of that. Personality, whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was kind of trolling Keanu Reeves, and he said, "So, What happens, Keanu, when we die? And Keanu Reeves says, the people who loved us will miss us. In other words, he didn't go there. He just stayed on this side of the mortal coil and talked about the human cost of losing a loved one. And it was interesting to watch how the audience at first thought that it was just an inane comment.
Uh-huh.
And as time passed and it sunk in, the people who loved us will miss us. Everybody was saying, oh, that's right. You know what I mean? It was a tender moment, and I thought that it was great because he didn't take the bait.
Yeah.
And he didn't go into some long, windy, philosophical view of the afterlife.
Yeah.
Because
It's
we
short,
don't know.
it's sweet,
It
it's to the point.
And it's true.
It is. It is.
I loved him for that.
Yeah. No, there's just, I know that, you have to take stars as personas with a grain of salt because, certainly a lot of this stuff is calculated, but, I just like the guy.
I do too.
He genuinely comes across as this, nice, thoughtful, earnest guy who, wants to do good work, wants to help others. On the Matrix sequels, gave a ton of his money to the crew because he was, pocketing quite a bit. He didn't need it all.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of guy he is. And you got to appreciate that. And by the way, that's a smart answer. That's an answer that will charm everyone and alienate no one.
No,
you got to appreciate the brilliance of that.
It's kind of darling, and he thought of that. With all the pressure of the cameras, there's an audience right there.
Yeah,
I mean, they're looking for a laugh. And he just goes against that grain and says something heartfelt and true about loss.
Yeah.
And that suggests to me that the man has really tremendous depth, that he would have that concept right on the top of his head.
Totally. Yeah.
So a good man there. And I don't know if it's something to do with the islands, the Pacific Islands or something, but another fellow that I was reading about, Dwayne Johnson, who's Samoan.
Yeah.
He is, according to some research, I saw it on Facebook today, he is the highest paid, and has been for the last 2 years, the highest paid actor of the world, and he's making $89.4 million this year.
It's an interesting case because he's delivered for studios a lot of the time, but he's been a little shakier lately. He's doing this movie called Red Notice with Gal Gadot. I think that got sold to Netflix.
Oh, well,
but at the same time, it's on the other hand, he did do, he's done the Fast and Furious films. He did Jumanji, which,
it's on the strength of the Jumanji films that he's making that kind of money, according to this article. Yes.
I believe that. The Jumanji, I think, was the highest grossing film of his career. Which,
in terms of his capacity to act, I watch the HBO series Ballers. I'm not into football or athletics at all, but I like the personalities involved. One of them is Denzel Washington's son, and that guy has all the magnetism of his dad.
of a Black Klansman.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Dwayne Johnson has to carry that series. He's on camera more than anyone else, that's for sure. And I don't see him screw up. I mean, I think he is utterly believable. His line readings are great. He radiates an open-hearted friendliness, which is really engaging. And it appears that even in the craziness of his life, he manages to stay sufficiently disciplined and in focus to be relaxed and happy with his life, and so I'm kind of in awe of that person, we
got to move on, but before we do, I want since you brought up John David Washington, gotta just throw this out here because I'm a Nolan nerd. Can't wait to see him in Tenet. That
what is it?
John David Washington is starring in the Nolan's next movie, Tenet.
No, I'm so glad to see that man do that.
I know, right? It's like,
because he's great.
He's
I love
awesome.
him.
He's so charismatic.
Yes.
I think I am always interested in what, who's going to be the next Nolan leading man, because when you get the lead in one of his films, you're following in the steps of Guy Pearce and Al Pacino and Christian Bale and Leonardo DiCaprio and Matthew McConaughey, and that's a lot of weight to carry. But if anyone is up to living up to those guys, it's John David Washington. And in fact, I think it's great because I think this will give him I think a little bit of the boost he needs and the chance to play a charismatic but also complex starring role. As it's Christopher Nolan. I presume there's going to be some layers to the character.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that, and that's excellent news.
Oh yeah. Robert Pattinson's in it too. Playing the.
How's his career has been fine, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's I like him because, he could have done anything he wanted after Twilight. Instead, he took all these really, kind of challenging, unglamorous, small roles.
Yes.
He really cut his teeth and showed, willingness to try tough stuff. And, I feel like kind of him going through that, and now you bring him back into the blockbuster realm, he adds a certain edge to it, at least on paper. So I'm excited for that performance as well.
So they're paired off. And the name of the Christopher Nolan movie is what?
It's a Tenet.
Tenant.
It's
a person running a room or something.
Well, it's Tenet, like a
Tenet. Oh, like a thought.
Exactly.
Oh, it's a
Tenet. Which funny, and the minute that movie was announced, I realized, gosh, it's really hard to pronounce the word Tenet.
It is, because it sounds like Tenant.
Yeah, because literally every time I say it, someone says, "Oh, he's making a movie called Tenet."
Oh, okay. Imagine it's an apartment house, and he's a little crazy. Yeah. He lives on the second floor. No.
See that sounds like a movie from Nolan's Memento heyday.
Yeah.
And actually, I kind of want to see that now. But,
yeah, right.
Well, moving on to our penultimate question. We're looping back around to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think it's fair to say that, love the movie, hate the movie. It courts controversy on a lot of levels.
Yes.
And I don't, even if, someone who's a big fan of it, I don't think they could deny that, But interestingly, the one controversy that really seems to stick is the controversy about the Bruce Lee scene, which for people who haven't seen the film, there's a scene where Brad Pitt's character gets in a best 2 out of 3 fight with Bruce Lee. The first round, Bruce Lee wins. The second round, Brad Pitt very brutally throws Bruce Lee into a car. They never get to the third round, so winner is never determined. And the argument against the scene is that it's offensive to Bruce Lee and his legacy. Shannon Lee, his daughter, made that argument. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, he knew Bruce Lee. He criticized the film as well.
Because the burlesquing of an Asian person's accent is part of it, right? Isn't it? Because
I think so.
I would think that they were playing a Chinese man for comic relief there. That's what it sounded like to me. It sounded like a movie from the 40s where the male housemaid kind of character would be talking in that clipped, sing-songy, someone's impression of how an Asian person speaks English.
Yeah.
And I think that it's reprehensible that
I agree.
they would choose to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's continuing the same toxic legacy that, you know, Mickey Rooney's character in Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Oh, yes.
You know, it may not be as glaring, but it's part of the exact
pretty
same
close.
trend.
Oh, yeah. It's not that far off that.
But why do you think that this is the controversy that's stuck? Because I think,
there's so many.
I mean, I think the movie's, you know, arguably misogynistic as well.
Yes.
And, you know, like I'm honestly kind of surprised that this is the one thing that seems to, you know, have really, you know, gotten people angry. And I'm not saying, you know, I'm not dismissing that, because I think everyone who's expressed anger at that scene is right to be angry. You know, it makes me angry as well. But I just wonder, and I want to hear why.
It's worse than that one scene.
Yeah, I mean, why? What is it that? Why aren't there other things that are getting that same level of attention?
Because I would guess that for some people, they just stopped paying attention to the movie at some point.
Sure.
Because it seems
that's certainly possible.
Yeah, it just seems like it's a series of red herrings. Nothing pays off. They're all kind of ad hoc, non sequiturs. You got this scene, but it doesn't really influence what happens in the next scene and the next scene. It goes on like that.
It's kind of a deliberately messy movie.
Yeah, well, it's all these
or
little
accidentally,
tableaus.
depending on your perspective.
I like the camera work a lot. I love the way he moved.
Robert Richardson, yeah.
It's just beautifully done. But the scenes don't influence the whole. They are only themselves. I mean, Leonardo DiCaprio is playing a man who has had a pretty good career as an actor, but now he's on hard times, and he worries that his performances are fading, and certainly all of the Hollywood brass thinks he's well past his prime, and they only use him to fill in, even though he had been a star. Yeah. Except that when you watch the scene that's being produced, he's got this long, moody monologue that he gives, which only a star would be given. So it underlines the whole premise, and it makes me think that Tarantino has absolutely had his eye off the ball through that whole movie. He believes he's an artist, he loves movies, but he didn't pay attention to his own film, and so it's just sloppy, and it doesn't hold together, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's definitely, as with all of his movies, there's a hothouse effect, you know, where his, you know, all he's willing to, you know, make movies about is movies.
Yeah.
You know, it's a closed loop. He's not, you know, willing to communicate experiences outside that realm. And you know, I mean, look, you know, I'm a big, you know, fan of you know, Terrence Malick, and you know, I'm sure like a lot of people, if they're listening, are rolling their eyes at me right now, like, oh, you snob, you know, dissing Tarantino, liking your boring Malick movies, you know. I don't find them boring, by the way, but but I know a lot of people do. But like, you know, the point is, you know, you look at Terrence Malick, and yes, he has, you know, a distinctive style, you know, as does Tarantino, but you know, he's making movies about something more than his life inside the movie theater. You know, he's making movies about his father, about the women he has loved, about his experiences, you know, with, you know, as a man of faith, you know, his friendships, you know, with other guys. You know, there's a sense that he's like open to the world, and then you could say the same thing about, you know, his Texas comrade Richard Linklater, who's, you know, has a very different style, but is open to the world and open to kind of really, looking beyond the
being
screen as well.
influenced by elements that he sees in daily life.
Yeah,
right?
Tarantino's just not capable
Not at
of
all.
that. And
No.
I think if you limit yourself like that, you're not going to grow as an artist.
I think that's happened to him.
Yeah.
He smothered himself by sitting in a screening room. Almost.
Absolutely, yeah. Right. And as far as the question, I mean, I think that, to me, I'm certainly someone who thinks, I'm not someone who thinks that we should only watch movies made by nice people. I think it's perfectly, fine to, enjoy, movies that are made by people who have done bad things, because, that's just the reality. We're never going to be able to purge Hollywood of, all the bad people, but at the same time, I do find, it really reprehensible that for years he, stood by knowing what Harvey Weinstein was doing, allowing this stuff to play out, without standing up for what was right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, they want to sweep that under the rug. They want to feel like, don't rain on my parade. I want to enjoy my Tarantino movies in peace. And, that's why there's been, I think, less of a desire to engage with, some of the other issues with the movie. I think, for instance, like, the movie's whole thesis is that, Hollywood before the Manson murders was basically this paradise.
Yeah.
It was the Garden of Eden. But, it's such a naive perspective because, for instance, like the scene where Brad Pitt is driving the girl to the Spawn movie ranch, and, she wants to, have sex with him. He very, nobly spurns her.
Yes.
I'm sorry. If that really happened in that time in Hollywood, that girl would probably get raped right there in the car. But Tarantino, the guy who's so obsessed with being hardcore about violence, he's oddly naive and childlike in his view of the world and the industry, and therein lies the problem. And I wish like that would, that was being engaged with more. Because I think, that's just as disturbing as the racism is, in my opinion.
And structurally, you really think that when he picks up the girl and drives to the ranch, it seems to be building to something. And it really does build because of the way the observers at the ranch, all young people mainly, young women, but also a couple of guys, they all look really sinister. It's clear that they have something to hide. And it's like, well, what is it they're hiding? Well, Brad Pitt remembers the old guy, Mr. Spahn himself, who owns the property. Where's he right now? Oh, he's in the house over there. Well, can I see him? Big paws, more sinister glaring at him.
Which I was sure that they killed him. When that happened.
Oh, yeah.
And then just like, no, he actually is in the house.
And
like,
he's just fine.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, how tired is that? Or then after that, when he's leaving, it's like, there's this big horse race. There's one alpha guy who needs to confront Brad Pitt.
Right,
and so he's racing down out of the mountains on a horse for various reasons. Gets there. Brad Pitt leaves. And what was the point of that scene? Because nothing happens.
Yeah.
It's just dumb to me.
See, it's an interesting thing because I see why the scene's in there, because you kind of need to build up some
thing about the Manson.
Yeah,
Manson family, yes.
Before it all goes down in the final act. But it's very odd, and I don't have a huge problem with this, but I do think it's strange that instead of playing out the implications of that scene, they actually just jump like 3 months ahead, and
the whole movie's disjointed to me.
Yeah, it's very loose. And to a certain extent, I appreciate that because to me that made it feel less fussy than Tarantino's other movies. But I don't think it's. I don't necessarily think it's good screenwriting. I think that's one of the things that Tarantino often, does that's a mistake is like kind of embracing sloppiness, like in a purposeful way and thinking, oh, if I do it purposefully, then it's okay. Like, for instance, having titles on screen that will tell you, like, oh, this person at a party is that famous movie star. Like, he's like, well, that's just like a fun, kitschy movie thing to do. And it's like, it's also lazy,
Yeah.
It's just straight up lazy and dumb, frankly. So, that line, and he's always walking that line between, artful kitsch and just straight up kitsch. That's a perilous place to be as a filmmaker.
I don't think any reviewer really called him on this movie, though. Not like me. My friend and I just tore it apart, sitting talking after the movie. It was really the grist for a great conversation, because there were, to me, so many obvious ways that movie played false. Just false. Like, there's a sweet little girl, a little actress, and Leonardo DiCaprio, the fading actor, is supposed to have had this really heartfelt conversation with her, but it doesn't pay off in any meaningful way. It's just goes and there's nothing else relevant about it.
Yeah.
And that happens time and again in that movie, to me.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to hold together as a whole. It's not interweaved with itself.
Sure. Yeah, and I get, he's trying to do like kind of a slice of life sort of thing, like rather than like a traditional plot. But at the same time, I don't think like he's the best guy to do that.
And the relationship between the two main characters. I mean, I didn't get necessarily. They're certainly playing it like the two guys really love each other and really care.
Yeah.
But that doesn't go anywhere either. I mean, it just. It's not heartwarming. It's like everybody is stepping into a role, and certainly DiCaprio and Brad Pitt, both of those guys, are at the top of their game. There's just no question about it. So it's fun to watch them. No question that they're really, really, really good.
Yeah.
But DiCaprio, as good an actor as he is, he can't play a bad actor. And so in that one scene where I guess he blows a take and they have to do it over, he's magnificent as that character in that meta situation where he's in a movie. Well, everybody would have known he was great. I mean, it's like it's not playing to the truth that he's a washed up guy.
It's funny because Anthony Lane said the exact same thing in The New Yorker.
Oh, he did?
He did, yeah. And what he said got me thinking, and what you're saying is getting me thinking, maybe the only way that movie could have worked, truly, is if you hired a genuinely bad actor.
I wonder.
I mean, what if you had like Hayden Christensen in that role? You know what I mean? He's had some good performances, but what if you had Hayden Christensen?
No, he's a good. Unfortunately, he's a good example. Yeah, he really is.
Yeah.
He would play it. Wouldn't. Or if DiCaprio, if somehow Tarantino, I don't know if you could get him to do it, to say those lines bad.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, DiCaprio can't not be a good actor.
Guess,
I mean, that's just who he is. I mean, I don't know. It's
that's an interesting to the service of art, and in honoring this role, which is the role of a bad actor. Anything that's not on camera, I can be my great talented self.
Sure, yeah.
When that camera's rolling in the movie for the services of the film, I'm going to deliver these lines really stiffly, so they don't really work.
One of the few examples where I saw that work was in the King's Speech, because
I've never looked at it with that in mind, but that's a good point. Say more. I'm interested in this.
Well, the Jeffrey Rush character in that film, he's a speech therapist, but he dreams of becoming an actor. And there's a scene where he tries out for a play, and he is just awful. like it's embarrassing. Like Jeffrey Rush knew how to play like someone who really loves acting and enjoys acting, but just isn't good at it. Like I believed in him as someone, you know, who just was simply incapable of giving a good performance on stage. You know, it's a very good performance of someone who cannot perform properly.
Well, so that issue has already been dealt with successfully then.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there are other examples, but that to me is the only one of recent memory that stands out.
That's a little gem of an insight there about that. It makes me want to watch that movie again.
Yeah, and I like that movie a lot. Yeah. I mean, but Leonardo DiCaprio. I mean, well, he's just, you know.
But he could have done it. I mean, according to that premise, the Rush situation proves that, in theory anyway, he could have done a bad performance in that.
I mean, because I think, you know, I mean, he's an extraordinarily capable star. DiCaprio.
Yeah, he is.
You know, so, but, I mean, maybe he needed different dialogue. Maybe he needed a different director. I mean,
that's the key.
Whatever was happening, it didn't quite fly.
No, because he was so damn great.
Yeah.
So, there you go.
Well, I think it's time to move into our final question. Although I think we could unpack Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for days.
I did it for hours with my friends.
Yeah, because that's one thing I think we can both agree is good about the movie. It's good fodder for conversation.
I think it would be, if I was teaching a film class, I would want to unspool Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because I could take it apart pretty easily.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to say one more thing about it. You know, I can't resist. So you know, I read A.O. Scott's reviews a lot.
Yeah.
A.O. Scott, you know,
New York Times.
Yeah. When I was growing up, when I was in middle school, you know, his reviews were the first reviews I read. They really shaped my view of what great film criticism is, how to analyze a movie. He did the Times review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and lately he has really prided himself on, you know, and you can tell this from his writing, you know, looking at movies through a feminist lens, looking, you know, in a very thoughtful way at issues of race and class in movies, you know, basically being, you know, trying to be, you know, for lack of a better term, a woke reviewer. There was none of that in his review of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. He clearly just wanted to, you know, not be bothered and, you know, just, you know, have fun with his Tarantino movie. And I think that just sums up with a lot of what is wrong with, you know, how people are looking at this movie. It's just this idea of turn your brain off, you know, enjoy the bright colors and, you know, the, to my mind, dumb jokes, you know, and the gore and, you know, just enjoy the party and like I would say, like, even for people like who really like the movie, take a closer look under the hood, you know, and you don't have to agree with, you know, me or with you, but I think, you know, it's still worth thinking about. It's worth engaging with these things. I think it's important and it matters, and all the more so because the movie's certainly going to be an Oscar contender. We're going to be, God help us, dealing with it for months, you know, so, I mean, like, you know, why not deal with it intelligently? You know, that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, the reviewers gave him a pass, and they shouldn't have.
I agree, yeah. So, on to our final question. I was thinking about the fact that, you know, we're coming to the end of a decade, you know, and that gives us a chance to look back at 10 years of movies, see how film has evolved as an art form, you know. I'm sure at T.H.O. we're going to do tons of end of the decade stuff down the road. You know, I know I'm going to be making, you know, lists and whatnot, but I want to, you know, like do a kind of, you know, just an early, you know, first draft look at you, if you will, like not necessarily our personal favorite films, but to talk about, you know, what we think are some of the most essential films of the decade for anyone who really wants to understand the state of movies and where movies have been going for the past, you know, 10 years, I mean, for lack of a better term, what were the films that have been important, over the past decade? So just, I mean, obviously we don't have time to, to do an exhaustive list, but just what are some titles that come to mind for you?
When I read your question in the email, prepping for this, I immediately thought of The Revenant.
Oh,
because
good choice.
To me, that movie in all its elegance and beauty really takes the viewer to a certain kind of edge.
Yes.
I mean, an edge of civilization, an edge of survival, an edge of love for a child, an edge of hate. I mean, that movie is so rich, and it shows what can be done on a film. I think it is masterful. I love it. I could watch it over and over again.
Well, I love that you bring up, it takes you to that edge. As I thought about this topic, I thought, there are really two kinds of films that belong in this list. Some are films that they were zeitgeist movies, that they captured, things that people, that society was, experiencing at the time. Others are landmarks simply because of what they achieved on artistic terms. Mm-hmm. The Revenant, that's a movie, it's a primal story that would be relevant and interesting in any era.
Yes.
I think the thing that makes it an event is the fact that, nothing that extreme have been done. Where they went
to
get that movie done,
right. Yes.
That's taking it to the next level, really.
Maybe it's the technology, maybe the money's available, maybe he has the status, but he was able to push it to, as you say, the extreme.
Yes.
And that's what makes it work so beautifully.
Yes, absolutely.
It really does take you there.
Yeah. What are there any other? You want to bring up?
When we talk about race, and I'm so glad personally that subject is finally getting attention, and that white people, such as myself, are having to be dragged, in many cases, to the realization of the suffering that this society has forced to the black population much of the time. And the utter discrimination that has been swept under the rug in polite conversation because nobody wants to feel guilt.
Of course,
certainly.
Yeah.
And then the movie Get Out happens.
Yes.
And it's so, Jordan Peele, he must be brilliant.
Yeah.
Because
I don't doubt it.
He distilled the culture in different terms. You don't even know that it's hitting you. They call it a horror movie, but it's this amazing critique of society.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He quite simply, he created one of the greatest allegories in the history of cinema.
I agree with you totally.
It's one of those ideas, maybe even a once-in-a-generation idea.
Yes.
That taps into something real, helps people understand something that, they didn't understand before. Look, you were talking about, like, as a white man, kind of, being exposed to stuff that, you wouldn't, that you couldn't understand otherwise because of these films. as a white person myself, things that movie articulated, like I never would have thought of, and that certainly doesn't make me an expert, but it gave me a level of perspective, that I didn't have before, and I think it's a great movie. I think it's an entertaining movie. I'm also just thankful that it exists because it was, unless you're determinedly closed-minded, you can't not grow at least a little bit watching that movie.
Because it grabs you by the scruff of the neck and says, look.
Yeah.
And in its own way, I think The Revenant does something similar. And so I guess looking forward and saying, what's the foundation on which the future will be built? I hope that movies that have the force to grab one's soul and make an individual truly think, and maybe think outside of their own comfort zone.
Yeah.
And that's really true of Get Out.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and the good news is that there are people that talented working today.
Yeah. You know, this is one reason why, because, Jason Blum produced both Jordan Peele's movies, and I love like this mentality of like as a producer, I'm going to go out and help filmmakers make really ambitious, exciting, entertaining movies for not that much money, and it's just great. It forces, I think, talented directors to kind of get down to brass tacks, make really good stripped down movies, and because there aren't hundreds of millions of dollars at stake, you can do something that is a lot more incendiary than you could do with that movie. I mean, Get Out, like, I think that movie was under $10 million.
Was it?
Actually,
I'm amazed.
It was a micro budget, and even Us, which of course was Peele's follow up. I mean, that was like a mid-budget movie. Like, I think that was like in the $30 million range. It's funny, when we reviewed Us months back, I guessed and I got it wrong. I said like 50 or 60 million, and I was like way over. I can't remember what the actual budget was, but it was very, very conservative. So I admire that. Doing a lot with not much money. I mean, that's more filmmakers should challenge themselves in that way.
Well, that's it's a cliche, but it's vision.
It is. Yeah. Well, I got a couple movies I want to bring up that I think are essential viewing. So I think starting at the beginning of the decade, I think the first movie you got to see from the 2010s is The Social Network, partly because it's just straight up great, it's an entertaining, delightfully scabrous time at the movies, but, if you want to get a taste of, how technology, specifically social media and the internet, are shaping our lives, you got to see that movie, I think, because, even though it's about the invention of Facebook, it very cannily uses Zuckerberg's story as kind of a broader metaphor for how social media isolates people, and just the novelty of that last scene of him alone in front of the computer hitting refresh over and over again. I mean, that's a big, moments like that are a big part of all of our lives now, and that's a movie that really gets to the truth of that. Going forward, I have to mention the Tree of Life, because that, I think, was a real important moment in movies this decade, because it was taking a very intimate story but imagining it in kind of a cosmic context, and like the idea to me of doing a family story, really focused around one boy, but placing it in the story of evolution, of the creation of the universe. I know things like that have been done before, but I don't think ever quite like that. So I think that was an important moment. I think you going along with what you were talking about, race, 12 Years a Slave, essential viewing for anyone. I mean, it's possibly the first slavery movie to not hedge its bets about the subject. I mean, to approach it in really unflinching detail. The movie that it was in the race against in the award season, Gravity, which I think is the most impressive movie of the decade, technologically speaking.
I think you nailed it on that one. That's true. That is an amazing movie, and it is the technology that makes that work so well.
Absolutely.
The weightlessness.
Yes, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. Well, you think about it like, I mean, that's basically an animated movie, right?
Yes.
With Sandra Bullock and George Clooney floating around.
Right.
So, I mean, you look at other movies like that. Like, look at Avatar, and look how much more realistic gravity looks than Avatar, and that was only 4 years later.
I know.
It was less than 4 years, actually. I mean, that's astounding where they were able to go with that kind of, with creating realistic looking environments that you could believe it would put an actor in. I mean, that's just something else.
No, I mean, it's I don't know if there are many breakthroughs left. I guess that was one that somehow didn't get, the brass band playing, hey, there's something new here, but it was very new.
It was, yeah, absolutely.
And it would be nice to think that there will be other similar advances. I don't know what it would possibly be, but maybe there is something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's tough because so much has already been achieved. Like, I think the special effects in the last three Planet of the Apes movies were pretty extraordinary. But then again, that's, really building upon what Peter Jackson did with Gollum. It's just that technology takes it to another level.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
They're using that all the time now. More power to them. That's good.
Yeah,
but you're right. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, you have people flying through tunnels on a space station.
Sure, yeah. I mean, everyone's always talking about digital humans, but for me, like, I just,
I've yet to see it.
Yeah. They've been, when I was like, 13 years old, they were saying, digital humans, we're working toward that. That was well over a decade ago, and so that I kind of hope that will never come to pass, because that's not something I want to see.
Zemeckis animation, what the one about the train going to the North Pole?
The Polar Express.
All you gotta do is watch a few minutes of that, and you see just how far that is scary. How horrible, how horrifying the characters look. The dead-eyed, zombie-like humans playing around in that movie. It's just a shame.
It's funny. I remember, like sort of gearheads in the industry were real excited about that movie when it came out.
Yeah.
But, like, people who act, regular people who actually watch movies were all like, this is fucking terrifying.
I know.
This is just sinister.
Think of the Tom Hanks character. Imagine seeing that person in real life. He's dead, even though he's acting like he's a living person.
Sure, yeah.
You don't want that in your life. That's the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah. A couple more movies I want to name before we wrap up. Boyhood, because that's an experiment that the likes of which had never really been done. I mean, again, done to a certain degree with movies like like Michael Apted's Up series, but never like that. Going to the year after that, I think Mad Max Fury Road was a pretty important moment. I mean, the issues that movie dealt with, kind of showing this group of women, trying to outrun the paramilitary goons of this patriarchal society. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was a far out allegory that sure turned out to be not so far out at all, because that movie came out right around the time that right before the Trump campaign really ramped up. So I mean, if that's not prescient, I don't know what is. Moving a year forward, I mean, how can you not talk about Moonlight? I mean, the first movie to receive that level of acclaim, to deal with portray a gay black man in a lead role, growing from childhood to adulthood. I think that was real milestone.
Yeah, that movie really works.
Yes, yeah, and then I mean, I'm amazed that something that I'm sure was seen to the studios as a hard sell. I mean, after it won Best Picture, it went up at the box office. I think it had its biggest weekend ever, and that movie turned a huge profit. You gotta feel at least a little bit good about life and movies when something like that happens.
And it was a micro budget, wasn't it?
Oh, really,
a micro budget,
ultra micro budget. Yeah.
And Mahershala Ali has done. He's got a great career now.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I may not have liked Green Book, but I sure liked his performance, and it excites me that a guy like that has 2 Oscars.
Yeah,
how cool is that?
Great.
Yeah. What a novel idea! The Academy actually, honoring good acting instead of Gary Oldman in a fat suit.
Right.
And then I feel like there was something. No, I don't think there was anything in 2017 I was going to bring up. I mean, we already talked about Roma. But I got to bring up Roma. I think that was a movie that really brought like kind of epic scale filmmaking back for a moment.
That guy so knew what he was doing to make that film. I mean, his use of repetition. I mean, the way he sets up the main character and puts her through trials that no one deserves to suffer, including watching her baby die.
I
mean, oh my God, that's really something.
It is something.
And it was set like a jewel in some sort of beautiful diamond encrusted setting of some sort.
Oh yeah. I love that description because I mean that's exactly what it is. I mean, it deals with some truly horrific stuff, and yet it is a thing of beauty.
Yeah.
The feelings and images it captures, the journey it takes you on. I mean, the humanity and the compassion clearly he feels for the character, for the woman she's based on, yet at the same time, not like, treating her as a gilded object, treating her as a human being, with desires, with a complex personality.
Right.
I mean, you have to admire that, and also, like I think had the movie been less widely seen, had it not been on Netflix, for instance, I feel like it would have received less criticism, but it was on Netflix, it was widely seen, so a lot of people, I think, who maybe, don't really like that kind of thing, you got them coming out of the woodwork saying, it's boring, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
I don't find that at all. I think every second of that movie is riveting. Yep. And I would say even if you don't like that movie, it's not yours to dislike. And I know that sounds harsh, but the truth is that movie has an important meaning in the history of the world, frankly, because it brought attention to the plight of indigenous women in Mexico in a way that no mainstream film ever had.
Ever risk that kind of obscure topic. Oh no, we're not going there.
Right, and that matters. Whether you like the movie or not, the world is better because of that movie. And look, it's not a silver bullet, not by a long stretch. But
no, because it's a movie, one, and it takes time to watch it, and the people who are less woke, to use a really awkward formulation,
sure.
aren't going to watch it anyway.
Yeah. But it's still, I think, it's an important film. I think it's a beautiful film. I think it's an entertaining film, frankly.
It is.
It sure entertained me. I mean, it's suspenseful, it's exciting, it's moving, it's visually wondrous. I think it's a movie that's only going to get better with time, and more so than Cloud Atlas, by the way.
Well, when when I think of Roma, I know that when I turned it on, and this happens a lot, I give a movie maybe 15 minutes, maybe 10, and I shut them off.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I expected to do with Roma, because I thought it was all hype.
Sure, because the hype was intense, so naturally you'd be suspicious.
Yeah, I'm going to be counter to it just for my own ego's satisfaction.
Sure.
I don't buy into hype. And then
I think we all have moments like that.
Yeah, and you watch the water going over the brick.
Oh God!
It was like, I don't know. It was like, wait a minute, how can you start a movie like this? Just this water, waves of water going over brick, and it's like, I don't know, something about the artistry of the director understood that you can catch someone's attention and like a cat following a piece of yarn, they'll just go further and further into it, and that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I love that movie.
See, and the funny thing is like just staring for minutes at water rushing over brick.
And that's what happens.
It sounds boring.
Yeah.
But when you actually watch it, like certainly my experience was like, dude, I just want to stare at this forever, man. It's so beautiful. And then also the fact from going from the water, across, running across the floor like that to the waves surging toward her at the end. I mean,
oh, sure.
If that's not cinema to die for, goddamn it, what is?
No, I was going to mention another 2017 movie that I really do think...
please,
that deserves to be mentioned. The director, Chloe Zhao.
Oh.
T.H.O. The writer is such a great human film.
Yeah.
It may not have quite the darkness and the resonance, but it does come close. I'm saying, comparing it to Roma.
Yeah.
It's in that category, and it is beautifully done.
I agree. Yeah.
So if there are people like that working, then there's hope for the 2020s.
I agree. Yeah. And gosh, what a great showcase for non-actors who really, they give some of the best performances of the decade. I mean, Brady Jandreau, God, if I would never have known had I not, read about the film, that, he hadn't done a movie before.
I thought he was a young breaking star.
Yeah.
Anything but.
Yeah. You think like, you if you watch the movie, if you go into a cold, you'd think like, oh, this is like, like some, hardcore, method dude who's like the next Robert De Niro or Edward Norton.
He understands how to underplay. He's just ungodly handsome, and he knows how to underplay.
Yeah.
And it's like, it turns out, oh no, he's not an actor. He is, but not because he was trained.
I agree with you. Stuff like that gives me hope, and what better note to end on than a note of hope?
I applaud that idea.
Well, if you like this podcast, please click thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at T.H.O Movie Reviews. And please check out all the great reviews and content we have at thomoviereviews.wordpress.com. Once again, I'm your host, Bennett Campbell Ferguson. I'm here with Jim Newman, and if I don't stop recording now, we're gonna find more things to make fun of him once upon a time in Hollywood. So
we could do that, but we don't have to.
Next podcast.
Yes.